Hello everyone, welcome back to another video with On Point Politics, your number one stop for all things polling and election analysis in the United States. And today we're going to be looking at the most likely paths for each candidate in the 2024 presidential election. Make sure to hit the like button and to subscribe if you want more content just like this. And so right now I have my election odds model up. We can see that we finally got this thing up and running. Make sure to go to onpointpolitics.com to get daily updates on the odds as well as on our national average, which is adjusted by party ID to eliminate all the polling bias as much as possible in the national data. And when you do that, Donald Trump actually leads the national popular vote by 3.2%, which is a stark contrast from the 1.9% that you see on RCP. And we pretty much use the same pollsters as RCP, by the way. We don't really tend to use too much from 538, only a select few, just because we want to try to have, a sizable pool, about 10 or more pollsters nationally to give us a good idea of where we're at. And right now, Donald Trump is in the lead by a pretty substantial amount. And right now, undecideds are at around 2.6%. I have a thing in the grading system where it grades by the margin. It grades by the margin of 2020, first of all. Then it grades on sample size, whether or not it's a likely voter screen. And then it grades on undecided. So the more undecideds a poll has, the less of a grade it gets. So when you have less undecideds, your poll gets more weight because you have less people that are still trying to choose who they're voting for, and I can weigh down undecideds in the polling data, and it kind of helps me get as clear of an aggregate as possible going into an election day. And what's fairly fascinating is as Kennedy's support has dropped, because we all know Kennedy did drop out of the race, and around August 25th, August 26th, around here, once that happened, as he's been going down, he's not at zero, by the way. I don't know why the graph is showing it at zero. He's a little bit lower. He's a little bit lower than where he was. He's probably at like 2.2%. But as he's been going down, Trump has been going up all of a sudden, because Trump had been going down pretty, not consistently down to the point where he was going to tank, but I mean, he was dropping in support. I mean, from August 22nd to August 26th, he did drop about half a point. And this day here is when I weighed for undecideds, and Harris pretty much picked up all the undecideds that hadn't been weighed. So for those of you who claim that I'm biased, I weighed for undecideds and it ended up helping Harris. And this kind of helps me get a little bit of a clearer picture. And I kind of knew she wasn't at 43%. That seemed a little unrealistic. 45 seems a lot more realistic because that's what her adjusted job approval rating actually is. When you adjust her job approval, she's floating around here. And what you'll notice is that she hasn't gone above 45. She actually kind of stabilized, and it is now starting to go down, it seems like, in the average as of today. And if Donald Trump is leading by 3.5 points, I mean, you're going to have an electoral college victory that's pretty sizable. And that's what that is based off. That's why you see such a lopsided map where basically, all the red states from 2020 plus Iowa and Ohio and Texas are pretty much guaranteed in Donald Trump's column at this point in time. I mean, that's where those are effectively. And these are the odd margins, by the way. These are not like, state margins. These are just margins for the odds themselves. So when we fill this out, you'll kind of see that these are not based off of that. It's just kind of based off the odds of the states going a certain way. California, same exact thing. You kind of have, some of these states that are basically guaranteed to go to either party. Maine's 1st congressional district, I believe, is also in that column as well. So at that point, we pretty much got a pretty sizable win right now for Donald Trump in terms of the safe states that he's guaranteed to take. And, these are plus 80% chance for either candidate to take. And Harris is only at 114, which isn't really great. And looking at a state like Florida, this one is in the likely column in terms of odds. It's around 70 to 80% chance of flipping to Donald Trump or staying in Donald Trump's column. The state's been trending to the right. I don't really see any realistic path for Harris to be winning it, especially with her being a little bit more far left than most Democrats. She's not going to play out well in the state of Florida, and she's probably going to go on to lose by double digits there. looking at the likely states for the Democrats in terms of the odds, we got Washington, we have Oregon, Illinois, Connecticut, Delaware, and Rhode Island. These are states that have a basically 70 to 80% chance of going to Harris, which are not great because in 2020, Trump would have had like a 5-10% chance, probably even less than that in some of these states. And he's getting like 20% odds in some of these states. He's closing in on 30 in Illinois, which isn't great. That's really bad for Harris because 27% is really good. I mean, he had, when I tested the model to 2020, which we can actually see down here, this is the map that we get for the model, and this is the actual result for the election. It's basically pretty much exactly the same as 2020. All the state calls are correct, and the margins are like a tiny bit off. But everything else is pretty much right for the most part, which is pretty fascinating. And so when you test the model to 2020, you get something that's fairly accurate. And so if Donald Trump is basically a lock in some of these states and in Texas, it's going to be a problem for the incumbent vice president. Looking at the states that have a 60 to 70% chance of going to her, I mean, you have Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. I mean, those are in. I mean, 60% odds are pretty good. And that puts Donald Trump at 297. And the states that are kind of leaning are Colorado and New Jersey. Those are the states that have 60 to 70% odds of going to Harris, which again are not great odds for Harris. I mean, Donald Trump's got a 32% chance in New Jersey. That's fairly high. If you guys understand anything about odds, they're fairly high. And what I was going to mention about the 2020 model is that in the national model, with these margins right here, Donald Trump only had like a 12% chance to win the election, even though he was within striking distance of winning the Electoral College. It was just that Michigan and Nevada in the simulations would probably go blue most of the time, and Pennsylvania, there were enough simulations for Wisconsin and Pennsylvania to go blue enough for there to create a simulation where Biden could win effectively. It was just a hard path for Trump. Like, it was hard to construct a path for him because really his only realistic path would have been Wisconsin, Georgia, Arizona. Like, that pretty much would have been it. Pennsylvania, I think, was a lost cause for him because of the whole Scranton Joe thing. That was basically gone. Wisconsin was still up in the air, but I would have said Biden was the slight favorite, and I was correct. And looking at Georgia, I mean, I didn't expect Georgia to flip, to be honest with you, and neither Arizona. When I did my projection 4 years ago, I had Arizona tilt red, and I had Georgia lean red. I had it at like a point or two for Trump because I didn't understand polling errors. I thought the RCP averages were spot on. Some of the states I was like, nah, there's no way the Rust Belt's going to be a 6-point win for Joe Biden. Like, I was very keen on that. I got some of these northeastern states wrong in terms of the margin, but when you plug everything into the model, it produces a more accurate map. Texas, Trump plus 4.7. It was Trump plus 5.5. Like, it wasn't that off. Florida was actually Trump plus 3. So I would have had the most accurate model for Florida. Same thing for North Carolina. It was plus 1.1 Trump. No model had that. Ohio and Iowa were practically on the money. Ohio plus 7.7 for Trump. Like, that's perfect. Colorado plus 12.5. Minnesota plus 6.2 for Biden. New York plus 24 for Biden. Like, these are pretty spot on margins. And so when you look at the past, I mean, Donald Trump is already favored in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. And when you look at these states and where the odds are, Donald Trump is at a 64% in Wisconsin and 62% in Pennsylvania. He is at a 67% in North Carolina, 67% in Georgia, 67 in Arizona, 63 in Nevada. So when you look at the margins, the states that are really kind of still up, you could say maybe are some of these, some of these states here. And you could even say, okay, maybe the states that are above 65 maybe still go in the column, which both Colorado and New Jersey do. So really, this is sort of an expanded map. And if Donald Trump is already sweeping the Rust Belt, it's a lot harder for Harris to win. And this is very evident based out of the demographics that we're looking at. I mean, Donald Trump is performing way better with Hispanics than other GOP nominees, even more so than Bush. And that's why he is sweeping North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada, not to mention the African American support that the former president has. And so he's on the brink of 270. Like, he is right there. Even if he loses, it'll be very narrowly. RCP's map actually has the 270 Harris to 268 map. Like, she's literally ahead in the Rust Belt states, and like Trump is still ahead in some of the Sun Belt states. And I expect the polling errors on RCP to be pretty bad. But on my end, I also have my own state averages as well. Like, I have my own state average because I reweigh all the numbers by party ID. And when you do that, Donald Trump is up in Georgia by a little bit over 5, up in North Carolina by a little bit over 5, same thing in Arizona, same thing in Nevada. Like, it's very apparent that he's up there by quite a bit. And that's what my forecasts have. Like, he's winning all of these states by over 5 points, with the least red being Nevada. So that's kind of where we're at in terms of the Sun Belt. And if Texas and Florida are basically guaranteed, I mean, Donald Trump needs one of those Rust Belt states. And so it's going to come to a point where Harris is effectively going to be locked out of the presidency if she does not get this one path. This is basically Harris's only path, because if she's performing that badly with Hispanics and African Americans, she really can't win the Sun Belt, because Nevada and Arizona have a lot of those Mexican American voters that may possibly have been around for a lot longer than most Hispanics. And Maricopa, GOP registration looks really good in Maricopa County, 60,000 new voters since 2020. And Nevada, the voter registration looks amazing there too. And Georgia, the mail-in ballots are really, really low right now. Like, absentee ballot requests are extremely low, even lower than 2016 right now. And if that's the case, Harris is not going to have the willpower to be able to pull out a victory in Georgia at all. She may lose it by more than 2016 if the ballots stay at 88,000, which I doubt it. It's probably at like 120 right now. But even if you get a little bit less than 2016, that's not good enough. And so that's going to be a big problem. And so if we were to kind of fill this out and say, okay, like, these states are basically going to go to the Democrat or the Republican, like, let's say these all go, effectively the one path that she's got is that Rust Belt path, and Nebraska second. Even if Nebraska second were to fall, which is a possibility because of that suburban vote, and if it swings to Donald Trump, that kind of hinges her path on the Rust Belt. I mean, she would be tied in the Electoral College with the former president, and at that point, she really doesn't have a saving grace, because she would effectively be locked out of the presidency, and Donald Trump went through the House of Representatives. And looking at Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin has been trending to the right the most out of all these states, and has been voting to the right of the nation by around 4 points. And so if that's the case, if Donald Trump's even like losing the popular vote by 4, he probably still wins Wisconsin, and that gets him the Electoral College victory that he needs. And so if you guys did enjoy this quick analysis, make sure to hit the like button and to subscribe if you want more content just like this. And make sure to go to betonline.com. You can see betting odds for the latest presidential election and the states as well. For example, if you were to bet $100 on Donald Trump in California, you'd win $2,500. That's crazy. Same thing for Connecticut. If we looked at Hawaii, you would win the same amount. Georgia, Donald Trump is actually the favorite in Georgia, because if you bet on Harris, you'd make $135 if you bet 100. So that's kind of interesting. Looking at the odds in Idaho, wow, look how much you could win if Harris would have somehow picked up Idaho. You could win 4,000 with 100. That's insane. So some of these odds are pretty nuts. Looking at Minnesota, this may be a good bet. I mean, I may go over this at some point, seeing where people could potentially bet. Now, disclaimer, do not do my bets. Please do not, because if I get it wrong, I don't want to hear complaints that we lost money. But this might be a possibly good bet. I mean, I may put down 100 in Minnesota and see where that gets me, because if it somehow flips, that would be a good bet. That would be a good one. But all right, guys, have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys in the next video.